The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete steps of the downtown courthouse as Marcus Chen checked his watch for the third time in as many minutes. 9:15. His custody hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and the 45 minutes stretching ahead felt both endless and terrifyingly short. He shifted the weight of his worn leather messenger bag on his shoulder, the one that had once carried legal briefs worth millions but now held only hope and a father's desperate love. Marcus had been awake since 4:30, reviewing his notes one final time by the dim light of his studio apartment's single window. Every document was organized, every argument rehearsed, every possible question anticipated. This hearing represented 8 months of preparation, 8 months of supervised visits with his daughter Emma, 8 months of proving he was worthy of being called her father again. The courthouse buzzed with the familiar energy of legal proceedings. Lawyers in expensive suits strode past with confidence Marcus once possessed, their polished shoes clicking against marble floors that had witnessed countless family dramas. He remembered walking these same halls 3 years ago, before the malpractice suit that destroyed his career, before his ex-wife used his professional downfall to gain full custody of Emma, before he learned that sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price too steep to imagine. A young mother hurried past, clutching her toddler's hand while balancing a diaper bag and court documents. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. Emma would be 9 next month, old enough to understand why Daddy couldn't live with her anymore, old enough to ask questions he struggled to answer without bitterness creeping into his voice. The supervised visits at the family center were stilted affairs, social workers observing every interaction, documenting every word for reports that would ultimately determine his fitness as a parent. His phone buzzed with a text from his court-appointed attorney. Running 5 minutes late. Meet you inside courtroom C. Marcus had requested a public defender after spending his savings on the initial custody battle. Margaret Santos was competent but overworked, handling dozens of cases just like his. She had warned him that Judge Patricia Hawthorne was known for her punctuality and low tolerance for excuses. One mistake, one missed deadline, one perceived slight could derail everything. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was fighting for custody in the same building where he had once represented other parents in similar situations. Back then, he had been David Chen, Esquire, family law specialist with a corner office and a reputation for protecting children from genuinely dangerous situations. The case that ended his career had involved a father who seemed perfect on paper but whose children showed subtle signs of psychological abuse. Marcus had pushed too hard, made accusations he couldn't prove in court, violated ethical boundaries in his determination to protect those kids. The state bar had been swift and merciless. His law license was suspended, his reputation destroyed, his marriage crumbling under the weight of financial ruin and public humiliation. Sarah had filed for divorce 6 months later, arguing successfully that Marcus's professional misconduct made him an unfit father. The judge in that initial custody hearing had been sympathetic but firm, supervised visits only until Marcus could demonstrate stability and rehabilitation. Now, 18 months later, Marcus worked as a handyman for a property management company. His days were spent fixing leaky faucets, painting apartment walls, and installing ceiling fans. The work was honest but humble, a far cry from the prestige he had once enjoyed. His supervisors knew nothing of his legal background, his co-workers saw only a quiet man who showed up on time and did quality work without complaint. The transition had been brutal, not just financially but emotionally. Marcus discovered muscles he had forgotten he possessed, learned skills that had nothing to do with law books and everything to do with practical problem solving. There was dignity in the work, satisfaction in repairing what was broken, but the salary barely covered his studio apartment rent and the costs associated with his custody battle. Emma had adapted to their new reality with the resilience children possess. During their weekly visits, she would tell him about school, about her friends, about the soccer team she had joined. She never asked why he couldn't afford to take her to nice restaurants anymore or why they spent their time together at public parks instead of movie theaters. Her acceptance of their circumstances made Marcus love her even more while simultaneously breaking his heart. The courthouse clock chimed 9:30. Marcus took a deep breath, straightening his tie, the same navy blue one he had worn to every important hearing of his former career. Today felt different, charged with possibility. His caseworkers' reports had been positive, noting his stable employment, appropriate housing, and genuine engagement during visits. Margaret Santos had expressed cautious optimism about their chances. As he climbed the courthouse steps, Marcus allowed himself to imagine the life that might begin after today's hearing. Weekend trips to the zoo, help with homework at his kitchen table, bedtime stories read in person instead of over video calls. The simple, extraordinary privilege of being Emma's father in daily life, not just during supervised appointments. He paused at the courthouse entrance, watching families emerge from hearings with expressions ranging from joy to devastation. Some children clung to parents they would see regularly, while others said goodbye for court-mandated separations. The family court system was designed to protect children, but Marcus had seen firsthand how imperfect justice could be, how good people could be caught in circumstances beyond their control. Where in the world are you right now, listening to this story? Whether you're commuting to work, taking a morning walk, or starting your day with coffee, Marcus's journey toward this crucial moment resonates with anyone who has ever fought for what matters most. The weight of love, responsibility, and hope that he carries up these courthouse steps is universal. Marcus checked his watch one final time. 9:45. 15 minutes until his future would be decided. Marcus stepped through the courthouse's heavy glass doors into the marble-floored lobby, the familiar scent of floor polish and legal tension filling his nostrils. The security checkpoint moved efficiently, guards scanning bags and checking identification with practiced indifference. He placed his messenger bag on the conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector, his mind already shifting into courtroom mode. The elevator bank was crowded with lawyers, families, and court staff beginning their day. Marcus pressed the button for the third floor, where Judge Hawthorne's courtroom waited. As the elevator climbed, he reviewed his key talking points one final time. Stable employment for 18 months. Clean background check. Positive evaluations from the family services supervisor. Emma's own expressed desire to spend more time with her father. The elevator doors opened, and Marcus stepped into the familiar chaos of family court. Parents sat on benches with nervous energy, children played quietly while adults whispered urgent conversations with attorneys, and bailiffs moved with purpose through the corridors. He spotted Margaret Santos near courtroom C, her arms full of case files and her expression focused. She looked up as he approached, relief crossing her features. "Good, you're here early. Judge Hawthorne is running slightly behind schedule, but that works in our favor. We have a few extra minutes to review the social worker's final report." She handed him a manila folder. "Everything looks positive, Marcus. I think we have a real chance today." Marcus opened the folder, scanning the typed pages that would help determine his future with Emma. The social worker had noted his consistent attendance at all scheduled visits, his appropriate interaction with his daughter, and his stable living situation. Under the section marked "Concerns," the report noted only his limited financial resources, which was expected given his career change. They found seats on a bench outside the courtroom, Margaret explaining the likely sequence of events. The judge would review all submitted documents, hear testimony from the social worker, possibly speak with Emma in chambers, and then make her decision. The process could take anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours, depending on whether any complications arose. As they talked, Marcus noticed an elderly man struggling with a walker near the water fountain. Without thinking, he excused himself and approached the man, offering assistance. The stranger gratefully accepted help reaching the bathroom, and Marcus guided him slowly down the hall. When he returned, Margaret smiled approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of natural compassion the judge needs to see," she said. The courthouse clock struck 9:55. Margaret gathered her materials and checked her watch. Almost time. She stood, straightening her blazer and adopting the professional demeanor that would serve them in the courtroom. Marcus felt his heartbeat accelerate, the familiar pre-hearing adrenaline beginning to flow through his system. Just as they prepared to enter the courtroom, a sound stopped Marcus cold. Through the heavy courthouse doors, carried on the morning breeze, came the unmistakable sound of a child crying. Not the frustrated whining of a tantrum, but the deep, terrified sobbing of genuine distress. The sound cut through the courthouse bustle like a knife, triggering every protective instinct Marcus possessed. Margaret was already walking toward the courtroom entrance, expecting him to follow. But Marcus found himself frozen, listening to the crying continue. Years of working with traumatized children in family court had taught him to recognize different types of distress. This wasn't anger or disappointment. This was fear, confusion, and desperate need. "Marcus, come on," Margaret called softly, her hand on the courtroom door. "We need to be seated before the judge takes the bench." The crying intensified, echoing off the courthouse steps outside. Marcus looked toward the sound, then back at Margaret, then toward the sound again. His feet seemed to move independently of his rational mind, carrying him back toward the courthouse entrance instead of into the courtroom that held his future. Margaret's voice followed him, urgent but restrained by courtroom etiquette. "Marcus, where are you going? The hearing is about to start." But Marcus was already pushing through the glass doors, stepping back outside into the morning sunlight. The crying was clearer now, coming from somewhere to the left of the main courthouse steps. He followed the sound around the corner of the building, into a narrow alley that ran between the courthouse and an adjacent office building. There, huddled against the brick wall near a service entrance, sat a small girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with dark hair escaping from 2 braids and a yellow sundress that was now dirty from sitting on the concrete. Her face was streaked with tears, and her small body shook with each sob. Marcus approached slowly, the way he had learned to approach frightened children during his legal career. He knelt down several feet away, making himself less imposing. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice carrying the calm authority he had once used in depositions and hearings. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" The little girl looked up through her tears, her dark eyes wide with fear and confusion. She tried to speak but could only manage broken words between sobs. "I can't. I don't know. Mama." Marcus felt his heart clench. This child was lost, afraid, and alone. Every parental instinct he possessed screamed at him to help, to protect, to fix whatever was wrong. But somewhere in the background of his consciousness, he could hear the courthouse clock beginning to chime 10 o'clock. His custody hearing was starting. Right now. Without him. The courthouse clock finished chiming 10 o'clock as Marcus knelt in the alley, watching this terrified little girl struggle to catch her breath between sobs. Every logical part of his mind screamed that he should be inside courtroom C right now, fighting for his future with Emma. But looking at this child's tear-streaked face, Marcus knew he couldn't walk away. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly, keeping his distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. His voice carried the gentle authority he had developed during years of working with children in crisis, a tone that conveyed safety without pressure. "Sophia," she whispered, wiping her nose with the back of her small hand. The name came out in a shaky exhale, barely audible above the distant traffic noise from the street beyond the courthouse. "That's a beautiful name," Marcus said, settling more comfortably on the concrete. "Sophia means wisdom, did you know that?" He had learned this technique during his family law practice. Engaging children in conversation about something positive related to them helped establish trust and calm their immediate panic. Sophia nodded slightly, her crying beginning to subside into hiccups. She studied Marcus with the careful attention children use when trying to determine if an adult is safe. Something about his calm presence and patient approach seemed to reassure her, though she remained pressed against the brick wall. "Can you tell me how you got here, Sophia?" Marcus asked, noticing details that his legal training had taught him to observe. Her yellow sundress was clean and well-maintained, her shoes were expensive sneakers, and her hair had been carefully braided with matching yellow ribbons. This wasn't a neglected child, she was well cared for and had become separated from someone who loved her. "I was with Maria at the doctor," Sophia said, her voice stronger now. "We were walking to get ice cream, and I saw a puppy across the street. I just wanted to pet it, but when I turned around, Maria was gone. Her lower lip trembled with the threat of fresh tears. Marcus felt his heart sink. This child had wandered away from her caregiver and was now completely lost in downtown traffic. He glanced toward the courthouse entrance, knowing that inside, Judge Hawthorne was probably calling his case. Margaret would be making excuses, asking for a brief delay, but Judge Hawthorne's reputation for punctuality was legendary. "Who is Maria?" Marcus asked gently. "Is she your mom?" Sophia shook her head. "Maria takes care of me when Mama is working. She has a phone with butterflies on it." Sophia reached into a small pocket in her dress and pulled out a medical alert bracelet. "This has Mama's number, but I don't know how to call it." Marcus examined the bracelet, noting the emergency contact information engraved on the back. The phone number was local, and the medical alert indicated a mild allergy to shellfish. More importantly, the bracelet listed the child's full name, Sofia Elena Rodriguez, and an address in the upscale Riverside district. "I'm going to help you call your mama, okay?" Marcus said, pulling out his cell phone. "But first, let's move away from this alley. It's not safe for you to be back here alone." Sophia nodded, accepting Marcus's outstretched hand. As they walked toward the front of the courthouse, Marcus dialed the number from the bracelet. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. "Hello, you've reached Dr. Isabella Rodriguez. I'm unable to take your call right now, but please leave a detailed message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. If this is a medical emergency, please hang up and dial 911. "Dr. Rodriguez," Marcus said after the beep, "my name is Marcus Chen, and I'm here with your daughter Sophia. She's safe, but she became separated from her caregiver near the downtown courthouse. Please call me back immediately at this number." He left his cell phone number twice, speaking slowly and clearly. Sophia looked up at him hopefully. "Did you talk to Mama?" "I left her a message," Marcus explained. "Sometimes grown-ups can't answer their phones right away when they're working. But don't worry, we're going to find her." As they stood on the courthouse steps, Marcus felt his phone buzzing with what he knew would be increasingly urgent texts from Margaret Santos. The internal conflict was tearing him apart. Emma needed him to be in that courtroom, fighting for their future together. His daughter was counting on him to succeed today, to finally bring her home where she belonged. But Sophia needed him too, right now, in this moment. She was lost, frightened, and vulnerable in a way that triggered every protective instinct Marcus possessed. During his years practicing family law, he had seen too many children who had suffered because adults made decisions based on convenience rather than conscience. Sophia tugged gently on his jacket sleeve. "Are you a policeman?" she asked, looking up at his face with curious eyes. "No, sweetheart, I'm not a policeman," Marcus replied, kneeling down to her eye level again. "I'm just someone who wants to make sure you get back to your mama safely." The courthouse doors opened behind them, and Marcus heard his name being called. He turned to see Margaret Santos approaching, her expression a mixture of concern and barely controlled frustration. "Marcus, what are you doing out here? Judge Hawthorne has called your case twice. She's not happy, and if you don't get in there right now, she's going to postpone the hearing indefinitely." Marcus looked down at Sophia, who had moved closer to him when the stranger appeared. The little girl's eyes were wide again, sensing the tension in the adult conversation she didn't fully understand. "I found this little girl," Marcus explained quietly to Margaret. "She's lost and scared. I can't just abandon her." Margaret glanced at Sophia, and Marcus saw her expression soften slightly. "But Marcus, this is your custody hearing. You've been waiting 8 months for this opportunity. Judge Hawthorne won't give you another chance if you walk out now." Marcus felt the weight of an impossible choice settling on his shoulders. His future with Emma hung in the balance, but Sophia's immediate safety couldn't wait for court schedules and legal procedures. He made his decision. Inside courtroom C, Judge Patricia Hawthorne sat behind her imposing mahogany bench, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her expression. She had been presiding over family court for 15 years, and punctuality was one of her most sacred principles. The courtroom clock showed 10 minutes past 10, and Marcus Chen was nowhere to be seen. Margaret Santos stood at the defense table, shuffling through papers with increasing desperation. She had already made 2 requests for a brief recess, citing an emergency that had detained her client. Judge Hawthorne's patience, never abundant to begin with, was wearing dangerously thin. "Ms. Santos," Judge Hawthorne said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "this is the 3rd time I have called the case of Chen versus Chen. Where exactly is your client?" "Your Honor," Margaret replied, standing straighter under the judge's withering gaze, "Mr. Chen was here at 9:55. I believe he may have encountered an emergency situation outside the courthouse. If I could just have a few more minutes to locate him." Judge Hawthorne's expression darkened. "An emergency situation? Ms. Santos, your client has been waiting 8 months for this custody hearing. What possible emergency could be more important than fighting for time with his daughter?" At the plaintiff's table, Sarah Chen sat with her attorney, David Morrison, a sharp-dressed man who specialized in high-conflict custody cases. Sarah looked genuinely puzzled by her ex-husband's absence, though Morrison seemed pleased by this unexpected turn of events. He leaned over to whisper something in Sarah's ear, and she nodded reluctantly. "Your Honor," Morrison said, rising from his chair with practiced confidence, "my client is as surprised as anyone by Mr. Chen's failure to appear. However, this absence speaks directly to the pattern of unreliability that has characterized Mr. Chen's relationship with his daughter. We respectfully request that the court proceed without him." Judge Hawthorne turned her attention to the court reporter, ensuring that every word was being captured for the official record. This hearing was scheduled to determine whether Marcus Chen would receive expanded custody rights, potentially including overnight visits and holiday time with his daughter Emma. The social worker assigned to the case, Linda Martinez, sat in the gallery with her thick file of reports and observations. She had been prepared to testify about Marcus's consistent improvement over the past 18 months, his stable employment, and his genuine engagement during supervised visits. Now she looked confused and disappointed by his inexplicable absence. "Ms. Martinez," Judge Hawthorne addressed the social worker directly, "you have been supervising Mr. Chen's visits with his daughter for the past 8 months. In your professional opinion, has he ever shown this kind of irresponsible behavior before?" Linda Martinez stood, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "No, Your Honor. Mr. Chen has been punctual for every single visit. He's never missed an appointment, never been late, never given me any reason to question his commitment to his daughter. This is completely out of character." Judge Hawthorne made a note on her legal pad, her pen scratching audibly in the quiet courtroom. The absence was indeed puzzling, given Marcus's otherwise exemplary record during the supervised visitation period. But family court operated on schedules and procedures, not on speculation about character. "Your Honor," Margaret Santos tried again, rising with renewed determination, "I know how this looks, but I can personally attest to Mr. Chen's dedication to this case. He has been preparing for this hearing for months. Something significant must have happened to keep him away." Morrison seized the opportunity. "Your Honor, we sympathize with Ms. Santos's position, but the court's time is valuable, and other families are waiting for their hearings. Mr. Chen's absence demonstrates exactly the kind of unreliability that makes him unsuitable for expanded custody. We ask that the court deny his petition and maintain the current supervised visitation arrangement." Outside the courtroom, Margaret's phone buzzed with a text message, but she couldn't check it while court was in session. She had no way of knowing that Marcus was 3 blocks away, still trying to reach Sophia's mother while keeping the frightened child calm and safe. Judge Hawthorne consulted her calendar and the court schedule. She had 3 more custody hearings scheduled for the morning, plus a contentious adoption case that was expected to run long. The efficient administration of justice required adherence to schedules, regardless of individual circumstances. "Ms. Santos," the judge said finally, "I am going to give your client exactly 15 more minutes. If Mr. Chen has not appeared by 10:30, I will proceed with this hearing in his absence." Given the seriousness of custody matters, the court cannot indefinitely delay proceedings for unexplained absences. Margaret felt her heart sink. 15 minutes was not nearly enough time to locate Marcus and get him back to the courtroom, especially since she had no idea where he had gone or why. She could only hope that whatever emergency had drawn him away would resolve quickly enough for him to return. "Thank you, Your Honor," Margaret said, though she knew the gesture was largely symbolic. She sat back down at the defense table, checking her phone discreetly and finding 3 missed calls from Marcus. Her attempts to call him back went straight to voicemail. The courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence as everyone waited. Sarah Chen fidgeted with her purse, occasionally glancing toward the door as if expecting her ex-husband to burst through at any moment. Despite their bitter divorce and custody battle, she knew Marcus loved Emma deeply and would never intentionally sabotage his chances of spending more time with their daughter. Judge Hawthorne used the delay to review the case file one more time. Marcus Chen's record showed a man who had made serious professional mistakes but had worked hard to rebuild his life. His employment history was solid, his housing situation stable, and his interaction with Emma during supervised visits consistently positive. The only mark against him was this inexplicable absence from the most important hearing of his life. At 10:25, the courtroom doors remained closed. Margaret Santos stood once more, preparing to make what she knew would be a futile final plea for more time. She had represented dozens of parents fighting for their children, but she had never had a client simply vanish on the day that mattered most. The clock on the courtroom wall ticked toward 10:30, each second bringing Marcus Chen closer to losing his chance at expanded custody of his daughter Emma. Marcus knelt beside Sophia on the courthouse steps, his phone pressed to his ear as he tried Dr. Rodriguez's number for the 3rd time. The voicemail greeting played again, professional and distant, while Sophia looked up at him with trusting eyes that reminded him painfully of Emma at that age. 10:23. His custody hearing was proceeding without him, and he was making a choice that might cost him everything. "I can't reach your mama right now," Marcus explained gently, "but we're going to figure this out together, okay? Tell me about Maria. What does she look like?" Sophia wiped her nose with a tissue Marcus had given her from his messenger bag. "She has brown hair like mine, but shorter. And she wears glasses with purple on them. She was supposed to take me for ice cream after the doctor, but then I saw the puppy." Marcus felt his phone vibrating with what he knew were increasingly desperate messages from Margaret Santos. He glanced at the screen long enough to see Judge Hawthorne and 15 minutes before forcing himself to focus on Sophia. This little girl needed him right now, and despite the cost, he couldn't abandon her. "What kind of doctor were you visiting?" Marcus asked, hoping to gather more information that might help locate Sophia's caregiver. His years in family law had taught him that children often remember details adults might miss, and patients usually revealed crucial information. "The tooth doctor," Sophia said, opening her mouth to show him a small filling. "Mama said I was very brave. We go there because Mama knows the doctor from her work. A pediatric dentist." That narrowed the possibilities significantly in the downtown area. Marcus pulled out his phone and began searching for dental offices near the courthouse. There were 3 within walking distance, but only one that appeared to specialize in pediatric care. "Sophia, do you remember the name of the tooth doctor?" Marcus asked, showing her the search results on his phone screen. Sophia studied the listings carefully, her finger hovering over one entry. "Dr. Miller. That's him. He has a fish tank with blue fish." Marcus felt a surge of hope. Dr. Miller's office was only 4 blocks away, but it was in the opposite direction from the courthouse. Every step away from Judge Hawthorne's courtroom carried him further from his chance to fight for Emma, but Sophia needed him to make this choice. "We're going to walk to Dr. Miller's office and find Maria," Marcus said, standing and offering Sophia his hand. She took it without hesitation, her small fingers warm and trusting in his grip. As they walked down the busy downtown sidewalk, Marcus's mind raced through the implications of his decision. Judge Hawthorne was notorious for her strict adherence to schedules and her intolerance for what she perceived as disrespect to the court. Missing his custody hearing wouldn't just delay his case, it could permanently damage his chances of gaining expanded time with Emma. But looking down at Sophia's face as she walked beside him, chattering about the blue fish in Dr. Miller's waiting room, Marcus knew he had made the only choice he could live with. During his years practicing family law, he had seen too many children failed by adults who chose convenience over conscience, procedure over protection. "Are you a daddy?" Sophia asked suddenly, looking up at him with curious eyes. "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice catching slightly. "I have a little girl named Emma. She's a bit older than you." "Where is she?" Sophia asked with the innocent directness that only children possessed. "She lives with her mama right now," Marcus explained carefully. "I'm trying to spend more time with her." Sophia seemed to accept this explanation without question, the way children often did when adults spoke honestly but simply about complicated situations. They walked in comfortable silence for a block, Sophia occasionally pointing out interesting dogs or colorful store windows they passed. Marcus's phone rang, and he saw Margaret Santos's name on the screen. He knew he should answer, should explain where he was and what he was doing, but he also knew there was nothing she could do to help him now. The damage was done. He had chosen Sophia's immediate need over his own future with Emma. "Why aren't you answering?" Sophia asked, noticing his hesitation. "It's someone from work," Marcus said, which was technically true. Sometimes work calls can wait when something more important is happening. Sophia nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense to her 6-year-old understanding of adult priorities. This response made Marcus's heart ache with its simplicity. Children understood instinctively what adults often forgot, that some things mattered more than schedules and procedures. They reached Dr. Miller's building, a modern medical complex with a parking garage and multiple entrances. Marcus studied the directory, finding the pediatric dental office on the 3rd floor. As they rode the elevator up, Sophia grew more animated, recognizing her surroundings. The elevator doors opened to reveal a frantic woman in scrubs pacing near the reception desk. She had short brown hair and purple-framed glasses, exactly as Sophia had described. When she saw Sophia, her face crumpled with relief. "Sophia!" Maria cried, rushing toward them with tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, where were you? I've been looking everywhere." Sophia ran into Maria's arms, and Marcus watched the reunion with mixed emotions. Relief that Sophia was safe and reunited with her caregiver, but also the crushing realization of what his choice had cost him. His phone showed 11:15. Judge Hawthorne had undoubtedly proceeded with the hearing in his absence. Maria looked up at Marcus over Sophia's head, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much for finding her. I turned around for 1 second to check the appointment time, and she was gone. I've been searching for over an hour." What part of this story resonates most with you? Sometimes we face impossible choices where there's no clear right answer, only the choice we can live with. Marcus stood in that medical building, watching Sophia safe in Maria's arms, knowing he had just sacrificed his custody case for a child who wasn't even his own. But as Sophia turned to wave goodbye to him, her face bright with the resilience children showed after surviving scary situations, Marcus felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't expected. He had done the right thing, even if it cost him everything. Marcus stood in the medical building's lobby, watching through the glass doors as Maria buckled Sophia into a car seat in the parking garage. The little girl waved enthusiastically at him through the window, her earlier distress completely forgotten in the way children could bounce back from traumatic experiences. As their car disappeared into downtown traffic, Marcus felt the full weight of his decision settling over him like a heavy blanket. His phone had been buzzing constantly for the past 20 minutes. Missed calls from Margaret Santos, text messages with increasingly urgent tones, and a voicemail notification that he knew would contain devastating news about his custody hearing. Marcus found a quiet corner near the elevator bank and finally listened to Margaret's message. "Marcus, where the hell are you? Judge Hawthorne proceeded with the hearing. She denied your petition for expanded custody and ordered a review of your current visitation rights. She said your absence showed a pattern of unreliability that makes you unsuitable for increased parental responsibility. Call me back immediately. We need to discuss damage control. Marcus leaned against the wall, closing his eyes as the reality of his situation sank in. 8 months of preparation, documented improvements in his life, positive reports from social workers, all destroyed in the hour he had spent helping a lost child. Sarah's attorney had probably argued that this absence proved everything they had been saying about Marcus's fitness as a parent. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Marcus couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. Sophia had needed help, and he had provided it. During his years practicing family law, he had represented parents who made decisions based solely on self-interest, and he had seen the damage that kind of thinking could inflict on children. Marcus walked slowly back toward the courthouse, dreading the conversation he would need to have with Margaret Santos. The downtown streets were busy with lunch-hour traffic, office workers grabbing quick meals between meetings, life proceeding normally for everyone except him. His phone rang again, and this time he answered. "Margaret, I'm sorry," Marcus began, but she cut him off immediately. "Sorry? Marcus, do you understand what just happened? You missed the most important hearing of your life. Judge Hawthorne thinks you're unreliable, irresponsible, and unsuitable for expanded custody. Sarah's attorney is already filing paperwork to have your current visitation rights reviewed." "I found a lost child," Marcus explained, knowing how inadequate the word sounded. "A 6-year-old girl who was separated from her caregiver. I couldn't just leave her alone and scared." Margaret's voice softened slightly, but her frustration remained evident. "Marcus, I understand that you wanted to help, but you had a responsibility to Emma too. You've been fighting for months to spend more time with your daughter, and you threw it all away for a stranger's child." The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth that Marcus couldn't deny. He had chosen Sophia's immediate need over Emma's long-term benefit, and the consequences would affect his relationship with his daughter for months or possibly years to come. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "We can file an appeal, but Judge Hawthorne's decision will be hard to overturn. Your absence is documented in the court record, and the opposing counsel will use it as evidence of your unreliability in any future proceedings. Honestly, Marcus, this sets your case back significantly." Marcus reached the courthouse steps where his morning had begun with such hope and determination. The building looked the same, but everything had changed. Instead of walking out with expanded custody rights and a plan for Emma to spend weekends with him, he was facing the possibility of reduced visitation or more intensive supervision. "Can I see the court transcript?" Marcus asked, sitting heavily on the courthouse steps. "I'll email it to you, but Marcus, reading it will only make you feel worse. Judge Hawthorne was not sympathetic to your absence, regardless of the reason." After ending the call with Margaret, Marcus sat alone on the courthouse steps, people walking past him on their way to hearings and legal appointments that would shape their own futures. His messenger bag sat beside him, still containing all the carefully prepared documents that were supposed to help him make his case for expanded custody. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Isabella Rodriguez, Sophia's mother. Maria told me what you did today, how you found Sophia and made sure she was safe. I would like to meet you and thank you in person. Could we arrange a time to talk?" Marcus stared at the message, surprised by the unexpected contact. He had assumed that returning Sophia to Maria would be the end of their brief intersection, that he would never know what happened to the little girl who had cost him his custody case. He typed back a simple response. "I'm glad Sophia is safe. That's all that matters." But Dr. Rodriguez replied almost immediately. "It's not all that matters, Mr. Chen. Maria told me you missed something important to help my daughter. I'd like to understand what happened and see if there's anything I can do to help you in return." Marcus felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, though he couldn't imagine what Sophia's mother could do to repair the damage to his custody case. But her offer of gratitude felt like a small bright spot in what had become the worst day of his legal battle for Emma. He responded with his phone number and suggested they meet at a coffee shop near the courthouse. As he waited for her reply, Marcus allowed himself to think about Emma, wondering if she would understand someday why her father had made the choice he did. Would she be proud that he had helped another child, or would she only remember that he had failed to fight for their time together? The afternoon sun beat down on the courthouse steps as Marcus gathered his belongings and prepared to face the consequences of choosing compassion over strategy. He had no idea that his decision to help Sophia would ultimately lead him to exactly where he needed to be, though the path would be unlike anything he could have imagined. Dr. Rodriguez's response came as he stood to leave. "I can meet you in 30 minutes. There's something about today that I think you need to know." Marcus arrived at the small coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where he could watch the entrance while reviewing the devastating court transcript that Margaret had emailed him. Judge Hawthorne's words were even harsher in black and white than they had sounded over the phone. "The court finds Mr. Chen's unexplained absence deeply troubling and indicative of the unreliability that makes expanded custody inappropriate at this time." The coffee shop was busy with the afternoon crowd, lawyers grabbing caffeine between hearings, office workers taking late lunch breaks, and the usual mix of downtown professionals conducting business over lattes and pastries. Marcus ordered black coffee and sat facing the door, wondering what Sophia's mother wanted to discuss that couldn't be handled with a simple thank you text. At exactly 3 o'clock, a woman entered the coffee shop and looked around with the purposeful scan of someone meeting a stranger. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional ponytail and wearing a white coat over dark slacks. She spotted him immediately, perhaps recognizing something in his posture or expression that marked him as the man she was looking for. "Mr. Chen?" she asked, approaching his table with an extended hand. "I'm Dr. Isabella Rodriguez. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." Marcus stood to shake her hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact that suggested confidence and authority. "Please, call me Marcus. And thank you for reaching out, though honestly, seeing Sophia reunited with Maria was thanks enough." Isabella sat across from him, declining his offer to buy her coffee. She studied his face with the same careful attention he had observed in Sophia, as if trying to read character and intention in his expression. "Maria told me everything about this morning," Isabella began, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested Spanish was her first language. "How you found Sophia in the alley behind the courthouse, how you calmed her down and helped her contact me, how you walked her all the way to Dr. Miller's office to find Maria." Marcus nodded, uncertain where this conversation was leading. Any parent would have done the same thing. Sophia was scared and alone. "No, Marcus," Isabella said firmly, leaning forward slightly. "Any parent would not have done the same thing. Do you know how many people walked past that alley this morning?" Maria counted at least dozen adults who saw Sophia crying and kept walking. "You were the only one who stopped." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise, especially given what his choice had cost him. "I'm glad I could help, but honestly, I'm not sure I made the right decision. Helping Sophia meant missing something very important to me." Isabella's expression grew more serious. "Maria mentioned that you seemed upset about being late for something at the courthouse. Was it a legal matter?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stranger. "It was a custody hearing. I've been trying to get expanded visitation rights with my daughter for 8 months. Missing the hearing probably set my case back significantly." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had appeared while Marcus wasn't paying attention. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more personal. "How old is your daughter?" 9 next month, Marcus replied, feeling the familiar ache that came with talking about Emma. "Her name is Emma, and she's the most important thing in my life." Isabella nodded slowly, as if processing information that carried weight beyond the simple facts. "Marcus, can I ask what you used to do for work? Before you became a handyman?" Marcus was surprised by the question and the fact that she knew about his current job. Maria had been thorough in her report, apparently. "I was a family law attorney. I specialized in custody cases and child advocacy. That explains it, Isabella said, more to herself than to him. The way you handled Sophia this morning, the questions you asked, the patience you showed. You have professional training in working with traumatized children. Marcus felt a familiar stab of loss for the career he had loved and lost. That was a long time ago. I'm not practicing law anymore. Why not? Isabella asked directly, her tone suggesting this wasn't idle curiosity. Marcus found himself telling this stranger about the malpractice case that had destroyed his career, about his attempts to protect children from a situation he couldn't prove was dangerous, about the ethical violations that had cost him his law license and his marriage. He hadn't intended to share so much, but Isabella listened with the focused attention of someone accustomed to helping people process difficult experiences. So you lost your career because you tried to protect children, and now you're losing time with your own daughter because you stopped to help mine, Isabella summarized when he finished. Do you see the pattern here, Marcus? Marcus wasn't sure what she meant, but before he could ask, Isabella continued. I'm not just Sophia's mother, Marcus. I'm Dr. Isabella Rodriguez. I run the Rodriguez Foundation for Family Services, and I'm also a licensed child psychologist who specializes in trauma and family dynamics. This morning, when you found Sophia, you demonstrated exactly the kind of professional competence and personal character that my foundation looks for in our advocates. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat, uncertain where this conversation was heading but sensing that something significant was about to shift. Our foundation provides legal aid and advocacy services to families in crisis, Isabella explained. We help parents navigate the court system, provide expert testimony in custody cases, and advocate for children's best interests. We've been looking for someone with your background and experience to join our team. The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and almost impossible to believe. Marcus stared at Isabella, wondering if he had heard correctly. But I'm not licensed to practice law anymore, Marcus said finally. Not yet, Isabella replied with a slight smile. But professional licenses can be restored, especially when there's evidence of rehabilitation and continued commitment to ethical practice. What you did this morning, sacrificing your own legal interests to protect a child, is exactly the kind of character evidence that reinstatement boards look for. Marcus felt as if the coffee shop had suddenly become surreal, as if this conversation was happening to someone else. This morning I destroyed my custody case to help your daughter. Now you're offering me a job. I'm offering you a chance, Isabella corrected. A chance to do the work you were meant to do, with people who understand that sometimes protecting children requires personal sacrifice. Marcus stared at Isabella across the small coffee shop table, trying to process the surreal turn his day had taken. 8 hours ago, he had been preparing for the most important custody hearing of his life. Now he was sitting with a stranger who was offering him a chance to return to the legal work he thought he had lost forever. Tell me more about your foundation, Marcus said carefully, still uncertain whether this conversation was real or some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. Isabella pulled out her phone and showed him the Rodriguez Foundation website. The foundation provides comprehensive family services, including legal advocacy, psychological counseling, and emergency assistance for families in crisis. We work with parents who are fighting for their children, children who need protection from dangerous situations, and families who are navigating the complex legal system without adequate resources. Marcus scrolled through testimonials from families who had been helped by the foundation, photographs of children reunited with loving parents, and case studies that reminded him why he had fallen in love with family law in the first place. This was exactly the kind of work he had dreamed of doing before his career imploded. Our legal team currently consists of 3 attorneys and 2 paralegals, Isabella continued. But we desperately need someone with your specific background in child advocacy and trauma cases. Someone who understands that protecting children sometimes requires unconventional thinking and personal courage. Marcus looked up from the phone, meeting Isabella's steady gaze. You're offering me this based on one morning with Sophia? You don't know anything about my work history, my legal skills, or my reliability as an employee. Isabella smiled, the first truly warm expression he had seen from her since they sat down. Marcus, in the past 2 hours, I've made several phone calls. I spoke with Linda Martinez, the social worker who supervised your visits with Emma. She told me you were the most dedicated parent she had worked with in 15 years. I called Dr. Miller's office, and they remembered you from when you represented the Patterson children 3 years ago. The staff said you were the most thorough and compassionate attorney they had ever worked with. Marcus felt a mix of surprise and gratitude that people remembered him positively from his previous career. After the malpractice case and the suspension of his law license, he had assumed his professional reputation was permanently destroyed. I also spoke with Judge Patricia Hawthorne, Isabella continued, and Marcus's heart sank. But she said something that might surprise you. Judge Hawthorne told me that your absence this morning was completely out of character. She said that in all her years on the bench, she had never seen an attorney more prepared or more genuinely committed to a client's welfare than you were in the Patterson case. The Patterson case. Marcus remembered it vividly, the case that had led to his downfall. 3 children whose father seemed perfect in every measurable way but whose behavior showed subtle signs of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. Marcus had pushed too hard, violated ethical boundaries in his determination to protect those children, and ultimately lost both his career and the case. Judge Hawthorne said the Patterson children have been in therapy for 2 years, Isabella said quietly. The psychological evaluations eventually proved that everything you suspected was true. The father lost custody 6 months ago, and the children are now safe with their mother and doing well in school. Marcus felt as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs. For 3 years, he had lived with the belief that his aggressive advocacy had been wrong, that he had destroyed his career for nothing. Learning that the children had ultimately been protected felt like a weight lifting from his chest. You were right about those children, Isabella said. You sacrificed your career to protect them, just like you sacrificed your custody hearing today to protect Sophia. That's not a character flaw, Marcus. That's exactly the kind of person we need on our team. But I'm not licensed to practice law, Marcus repeated, though his objection sounded weaker even to himself. The Foundation has successfully petitioned for attorney reinstatement in 12 cases over the past 5 years, Isabella explained. We have an excellent track record with the state bar, especially when we can demonstrate continued commitment to ethical practice and professional development. Your case would be particularly strong because your original violation involved overzealous advocacy for children's welfare. Marcus tried to imagine returning to legal practice, walking into courtrooms again as an attorney rather than a desperate parent. The possibility seemed both terrifying and exhilarating. What would the job involve? Marcus asked, allowing himself to consider the offer seriously. Initially, you would work as a family advocate while we pursue your license reinstatement, Isabella explained. You would help parents navigate the court system, assist our attorneys with case preparation, and provide support to families during legal proceedings. Once your license is restored, you would handle your own caseload and potentially supervise other advocates. The work sounded like everything Marcus had loved about family law, minus the financial pressures and ethical compromises that had complicated his previous practice. Working for a foundation would allow him to focus on helping families without worrying about billable hours or client development. There's something else you should know, Isabella said, her expression growing more serious. The foundation has a relationship with several family court judges, including Judge Hawthorne. We occasionally provide expert testimony and consultation in difficult custody cases. If you join our team, we would be happy to review your situation with Emma and potentially provide advocacy support for your appeal. Marcus felt his heart leap at the possibility of professional help with his custody case. Having the Rodriguez Foundation support could make the difference between supervised visits and meaningful time with his daughter. I need to think about this, Marcus said, though he already knew what his answer would be. Of course, Isabella replied, standing and gathering her purse. Take all the time you need. But Marcus, I want you to understand something. What you did this morning wasn't a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. It was exactly who you are, and it's exactly who we need working with vulnerable families. She handed him a business card with her direct contact information. Call me when you're ready to discuss details. And Marcus? Thank you for bringing my daughter home safely. Some debts can never be fully repaid, but I intend to try. As Isabella walked out of the coffee shop, Marcus sat alone with her business card and the slowly dawning realization that losing his custody hearing might have been the beginning of something unexpected rather than the end of everything he had worked toward. Marcus sat in his studio apartment that evening, Isabella's business card on his small kitchen table next to the devastating court transcript from his missed hearing. The contrast between the two documents felt surreal, one representing the end of his hopes for expanded custody, the other offering a path back to the legal career he thought he had lost forever. His phone had been quiet since his conversation with Margaret Santos that afternoon. She had made it clear that appealing Judge Hawthorne's decision would be difficult and expensive, with little chance of success given his unexplained absence. The best-case scenario was maintaining his current supervised visitation schedule. The worst case involved further restrictions or psychological evaluations to determine his fitness as a parent. Marcus picked up Isabella's card for the 10th time, studying the elegant logo of the Rodriguez Foundation for Family Services. The foundation's mission statement was printed on the back, advocating for children's welfare and family unity through compassionate legal representation and comprehensive support services. It was exactly the kind of work he had dreamed of doing when he first entered law school. At 8 o'clock, his phone rang with a video call from Emma. These calls were part of his supervised visitation agreement, monitored conversations that allowed him to maintain daily contact with his daughter despite their physical separation. Emma's face appeared on his screen, bright and animated as always, though he could see Sarah hovering in the background. "Hi, Daddy," Emma said, holding up a drawing she had made at school. "Look what I drew today. It's you and me at the park." The drawing showed two stick figures on swings, with a bright yellow sun and puffy white clouds. Emma had written "Daddy and Emma" at the bottom in her careful second-grade handwriting. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Tell me about your day at school." Emma launched into an enthusiastic description of her art class, her new friend Rebecca, and the book they were reading about a girl who could talk to animals. Marcus listened intently, savoring every detail of his daughter's life that he was only allowed to experience through these supervised calls. "Daddy, when are you coming to see me again?" Emma asked, her expression growing more serious. "I miss our Saturday visits." "I miss them too, Emma," Marcus replied carefully, aware that Sarah was listening to every word. "I'm working on some things that might help us spend more time together." After the call ended, Marcus sat in the silence of his apartment, Emma's drawing still visible on his phone screen. The gap between his current life and the father he wanted to be felt impossibly wide, but Isabella's offer represented a bridge he hadn't expected to find. He called Isabella's number, surprised when she answered on the first ring despite the late hour. "Marcus, I was hoping you would call tonight," Isabella said, her voice warm but professional. "Have you had time to consider our conversation?" "I have," Marcus replied, standing and walking to his small window that overlooked the downtown street. "I want to accept your offer, but I need to understand something first. Why are you willing to take such a risk on someone with my history?" Isabella was quiet for a moment before answering. "Marcus, 3 years ago, when you were fighting for the Patterson children, you called my office looking for expert testimony about psychological abuse in custody cases. I wasn't available to consult on that case, but I read your briefs and documentation. Your advocacy was thorough, compassionate, and exactly what those children needed." Marcus remembered that call, one of dozens he had made trying to build expert support for his suspicions about the Patterson father. Most psychologists had been reluctant to get involved without clearer evidence of abuse. When those children finally received proper psychological evaluation, everything you documented was validated, Isabella continued. "You were ahead of the system, Marcus. You saw what others missed, and you were willing to sacrifice your career to protect them. That's not a liability in our work, it's exactly what we need." What happens next? Marcus asked, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since losing his law license. Tomorrow morning, you can start as a family advocate with our foundation, Isabella explained. The salary is modest but sufficient, and we provide full benefits including health insurance. While you're working with us, we'll begin the process of petitioning for your license reinstatement. The state bar has specific procedures for attorneys seeking reinstatement after ethical violations, and our foundation has experience navigating that process. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with nervousness. The idea of returning to legal work, even in a limited capacity, felt both thrilling and terrifying. He had spent the past 18 months convinced that his career in law was permanently over. There's something else, Isabella added. I've already spoken with our board of directors about your situation with Emma. The foundation would be willing to provide pro bono legal representation for your custody appeal, and I would personally be available to provide expert testimony about your character and professional competence. Marcus felt his knees weaken with relief and gratitude. Professional legal representation had been financially impossible on his handyman's salary, and having Isabella's credentials supporting his case could make the difference between seeing Emma once a week and having her spend weekends with him. I don't know how to thank you, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. You already thanked me, Isabella replied. You brought my daughter home safely when she needed help. Now I'm bringing you home to the work you were meant to do. After ending the call, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table and wrote his resignation letter to the property management company. Tomorrow he would begin a new chapter, returning to the legal advocacy that had once been his passion and his downfall. The path back to Emma would still be difficult, but for the first time in months, he had hoped that his sacrifice that morning might lead to something better than what he had lost. He looked at Emma's drawing one more time before placing Isabella's business card beside it. Sometimes the choices that seemed to cost everything were actually investments in a future you couldn't yet see. Marcus was beginning to understand that helping Sophia hadn't derailed his custody case, it had led him to exactly the people who could help him win it. Marcus arrived at the Rodriguez Foundation offices at 7:30 the next morning, an hour before his scheduled start time. The building was a renovated Victorian house in the historic district, its warm brick exterior and welcoming front porch a deliberate contrast to the sterile government buildings where most family legal services were housed. A small bronze plaque beside the front door read Rodriguez Foundation for Family Services, advocating for children, supporting families. Isabella met him at the front door with coffee and a genuine smile. I see you're still operating on attorney hours, she said, leading him through a reception area decorated with children's artwork and family photographs. Some habits die hard. The interior of the building had been thoughtfully designed to feel more like a comfortable home than a legal office. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and play areas for children created an environment where traumatized families could feel safe rather than intimidated. Marcus could see the careful attention to psychological comfort that reflected Isabella's background in child development. Let me introduce you to the team, Isabella said, guiding him toward a conference room where several people were gathered around a large table covered with case files and coffee cups. The Rodriguez Foundation staff was smaller than Marcus had expected but clearly experienced and dedicated. Elena Vasquez, the lead attorney, had 15 years of experience in family law and a reputation for winning difficult custody cases. James Park, a former social worker turned paralegal, specialized in investigating family situations and gathering evidence for court proceedings. Maria Santos, the foundation's client advocate, helped families navigate the complex social services system while their legal cases proceeded. Marcus, Isabella said as they entered the conference room, I'd like you to meet your new colleagues. Everyone, this is Marcus Chen, the family advocate I told you about yesterday. Elena looked up from a case file, extending her hand with professional warmth. Isabella told us about what you did yesterday, finding Sophia and missing your own custody hearing to help her. That tells us everything we need to know about your character and priorities. James nodded approvingly. We've all read about your work on the Patterson case. That kind of aggressive advocacy for children's welfare is exactly what our families need. The fact that you were eventually vindicated makes your experience even more valuable. Marcus felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness as he took a seat at the conference table. The case file spread across the surface represented dozens of families in crisis, children separated from loving parents, and parents fighting systems they didn't understand. It was exactly the kind of work he had missed desperately during his 18 months as a handyman. Isabella opened a thick folder marked, Chen, Marcus License Reinstatement. I've already begun the preliminary paperwork for your license reinstatement petition. The process typically takes 6 to 9 months, but given the circumstances of your original case and your continued commitment to child advocacy, I'm optimistic about our timeline. Elena pulled out another file, this one marked with Emma's name. I've also reviewed your custody case, Marcus. Judge Hawthorne's decision yesterday was harsh, but it's not irreversible. We can file an appeal based on the exceptional circumstances that caused your absence, especially if we can demonstrate that your absence was the result of professional ethical obligations to protect a child. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. The possibility of appealing Judge Hawthorne's decision had seemed impossible given his limited resources, but having the Foundation's legal expertise behind him changed everything. There's precedent for custody decisions being overturned when a parent's absence was due to emergency child protection activities, Elena continued. If we can frame your assistance to Sophia as consistent with your professional obligations as a former family law attorney, we can argue that missing the hearing demonstrated your fitness as a parent rather than your unreliability. James leaned forward, his social work background evident in his systematic approach to case analysis. We'll need documentation of Sophia's situation, statements from Dr. Miller's office about the timeline, and testimony from Maria about Sophia's emotional state when you found her. The goal is to show that any reasonable parent or child advocate would have made the same choice. Isabella smiled at the energy and expertise her team was bringing to Marcus's situation. This is why I wanted you to join us, Marcus. Not just because we need your skills, but because you embody the values we're trying to protect. Your willingness to sacrifice personal gain for a child's welfare is exactly what families in crisis need to see in their advocates. Maria Santos spoke up from across the table. I handle intake interviews for new clients, and I can tell you that most of our families have been failed by systems that prioritize procedure over people. They need advocates who understand that sometimes protecting children requires unconventional choices. Marcus looked around the table at these professionals who had dedicated their careers to family advocacy, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced since losing his law license. The work would be challenging and emotionally demanding, but it was exactly what he had been trained to do and what he felt called to pursue. What would you like me to work on first? Marcus asked, ready to begin contributing to the Foundation's mission. Isabella handed him a case file marked, Emergency Intake Rodriguez Family. Ironically, this case has some similarities to your situation with Emma. A single father who lost custody due to circumstances beyond his control and is fighting to regain time with his children. I thought you might have unique insights into his situation. Marcus opened the file, immediately recognizing the complex mix of legal, emotional, and practical challenges facing the family. The father had lost his job due to corporate downsizing, fallen behind on child support payments, and subsequently lost custody when his ex-wife argued that his unemployment made him an unfit parent. It was exactly the kind of case where understanding both the legal system and the emotional reality of parental separation could make the difference between success and failure. This is perfect, Marcus said, already mentally organizing an advocacy strategy. When can I meet with the father? This afternoon, if you're ready, Isabella replied. But Marcus, there's something else I want you to know. Your first paycheck from the Foundation will be significantly higher than what you were earning as a handyman. I want you to be able to focus on this work without worrying about covering your basic expenses or the costs associated with your own custody case. As the meeting continued with case assignments and strategy discussions, Marcus felt a transformation beginning that went beyond professional opportunity. For the first time since losing his law license, he was part of a team that shared his values and understood that protecting children sometimes required personal sacrifice. His choice to help Sophia had cost him one custody hearing, but it had led him to exactly the people who could help him win the war for Emma's future. 3 weeks into his new role at the Rodriguez Foundation, Marcus stood in the family court hallway waiting for the Rodriguez family custody hearing to begin. The case had become a perfect demonstration of how his unique combination of legal knowledge and personal experience could transform a family's prospects in the court system. Roberto Rodriguez, no relation to Isabella despite the shared surname, sat nervously on the bench beside Marcus, clutching a folder of employment documents and character references. Roberto had lost custody of his twin daughters 8 months earlier when his corporate engineering job was eliminated in a massive layoff. His ex-wife had successfully argued that his unemployment made him financially unstable and therefore an unfit father. Marcus had spent 2 weeks helping Roberto prepare for this hearing, drawing on his understanding of both family law procedures and the emotional reality of fighting for your children. Together, they had assembled a compelling case that addressed not just Roberto's current employment status but his overall fitness as a father and his daughter's expressed desire to spend more time with him. Elena Vasquez emerged from the courtroom where she had been conferring with the bailiff about the hearing schedule. "Roberto, we're up next. Remember what we practiced about staying calm and answering only the questions asked. Marcus will be sitting right behind you for support." As they entered the courtroom, Marcus felt the familiar mix of nerves and determination that had once defined his legal career. But this time, he wasn't fighting for his own family. He was advocating for someone else's, using skills he had thought were lost forever. Judge Martinez, a fair but thorough jurist known for focusing on children's best interests, took the bench and called the case. The opposing counsel, a sharp attorney representing Roberto's ex-wife, immediately launched into arguments about Roberto's continued unemployment and financial instability. "Your Honor," the attorney said, "Mr. Rodriguez has been unemployed for 10 months despite claiming to search actively for work. He has missed child support payments and has shown no concrete evidence of financial stability that would support expanded custody." Elena stood to respond, her voice carrying the confidence that came from thorough preparation. "Your Honor, Mr. Rodriguez lost his position due to corporate downsizing that affected over 300 employees. He has been actively job searching while also pursuing additional certification in renewable energy engineering, a growing field with excellent prospects." She presented documentation of Roberto's job search activities, his enrollment in professional development courses, and letters from former colleagues attesting to his work ethic and professional competence. But Marcus knew the real strength of their case lay in what Elena presented next. "More importantly, Your Honor, Mr. Rodriguez has used this period of unemployment as an opportunity to be more present in his daughters' lives than his previous 70-hour work weeks allowed. The girls' teachers report improved academic performance and emotional well-being during the periods when their father has been more available." Elena called Roberto to testify, and Marcus watched with pride as the man he had been coaching for weeks presented himself with dignity and clarity. Roberto spoke about his love for his daughters, his commitment to finding stable employment, and his understanding of the financial responsibilities that came with being a father. But the moment that Marcus knew would determine the outcome came when Elena asked Roberto to describe his relationship with his daughters during his period of unemployment. "Your Honor," Roberto said, his voice steady despite the emotional weight of his words, "losing my job was devastating, but it taught me something important about being a father. When I was working 70 hours a week, I was providing for my girls financially, but I was missing their lives. During these months, I've been to every school event, helped with every homework assignment, and been present for every conversation about their dreams and fears." The opposing counsel tried to redirect focus to Roberto's financial situation, but Judge Martinez seemed more interested in the children's well-being than their father's employment status. "Mr. Rodriguez," the judge asked, "what specific steps have you taken to ensure your financial stability going forward?" Roberto straightened in his chair, delivering the answer that Marcus had helped him prepare. "Your Honor, I have accepted a position with Greentech Solutions beginning next month. The salary is comparable to my previous position, and the company specializes in renewable energy projects, which aligns with my additional certification. I also have a detailed budget plan that accounts for child support, housing, and savings." Elena presented the employment contract and financial planning documents that Marcus had helped Roberto organize. But she saved the most powerful evidence for last, letters from both daughters expressing their desire to spend more time with their father. Judge Martinez read the letters carefully, her expression thoughtful. At 9 and 11 years old, the girls were old enough for their preferences to carry significant weight in custody decisions. After a brief recess, Judge Martinez returned with her decision. Mr. Rodriguez, I am satisfied that your period of unemployment was due to circumstances beyond your control and that you have taken appropriate steps to address your financial situation. More importantly, the evidence suggests that your daughters have benefited from increased time with you during this transition period. She ordered a graduated increase in Roberto's custody time, beginning with overnight visits every other weekend and building toward shared custody over the next 6 months. Roberto's relief was visible as he thanked Elena and turned to shake Marcus's hand. Outside the courtroom, Roberto's eyes filled with tears as he processed the victory. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. 3 weeks ago, I thought I might lose my girls forever. Now I'm going to have them for weekends, and maybe more. Marcus felt the deep satisfaction that had originally drawn him to family law, the knowledge that his work had directly improved a child's life and preserved an important family relationship. But this victory felt different from his previous career successes because it was rooted in his own experience of fighting for his children. Elena approached them with a smile and another case file. Marcus, that was excellent advocacy. Roberto, you should know that Marcus's insights into your case were invaluable. His understanding of what parents go through in custody battles helped us frame your situation in terms the court could understand. As they walked back to the foundation offices, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since the morning he found Sophia crying behind the courthouse. Missing his own custody hearing had felt like the end of everything, but it had actually been the beginning of a new chapter where his personal struggles became professional strengths. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. How did the Rodriguez hearing go? Marcus typed back quickly. Complete victory. Roberto gets overnight visits starting this weekend, with a path to shared custody. Isabella's response came immediately. Excellent work. Come to my office when you get back. We need to discuss your custody appeal. I have news. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he walked faster toward the foundation building. 3 weeks of successful advocacy work had rebuilt his confidence, but his own case with Emma remained the most important battle of his life. Marcus hurried up the stairs to Isabella's office, his mind racing with possibilities about the news she had mentioned. Over the past 3 weeks, Elena had been working on his custody appeal while Marcus focused on his advocacy cases, but he hadn't expected developments this quickly. Isabella's office occupied the entire second floor of the Victorian house, with large windows overlooking a small garden where clients' children could play while their parents met with advocates. She looked up from her desk as Marcus knocked on the open door, her expression mixing professional satisfaction with personal warmth. Marcus, please sit down, Isabella said, gesturing to the comfortable chairs arranged around a small conference table. I have several pieces of news about your case, and I think you're going to be pleased. Marcus sat on the edge of his chair, his nerves evident despite his attempts to remain calm. After 3 weeks of successful advocacy for other families, his own case still felt like the most important battle of his life. First, Isabella began, opening a file marked with his name. The State Bar has expedited your license reinstatement petition. Given your work with our foundation and the letters of support from Judge Martinez and several other family court judges, they're prepared to schedule your hearing for next month instead of the usual 6-month timeline. Marcus felt his heart leap with excitement and nervousness. The possibility of returning to full legal practice had seemed distant when he first joined the foundation, but his success with cases like Roberto's had reminded him why he had become a lawyer in the first place. Second, Isabella continued, Elena has filed your custody appeal, and we've received an interesting response from Judge Hawthorne's office. The judge has agreed to consider new evidence regarding the circumstances of your absence from the original hearing. Isabella handed him a document marked, Emergency Motion for Reconsideration. Elena had crafted a compelling argument that Marcus's decision to help Sophia demonstrated exactly the kind of protective instincts and child-focused priorities that made him an excellent father. But there's more, Isabella said with a slight smile. Judge Hawthorne has requested a meeting with you, Elena, and me in her chambers next week. She wants to discuss your case personally rather than handling it through standard court procedures. Marcus stared at the scheduling notice, hardly believing that Judge Hawthorne, known for her strict adherence to procedure, was willing to consider his case informally. The judge who had seemed so harsh in her original ruling was apparently prepared to hear his side of the story. Isabella leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. Marcus, I want you to understand what's happening here. Your choice to help Sophia that morning has created a chain of events that goes far beyond your individual case. The legal community has taken notice of your work with our foundation, your successful advocacy for families like Roberto's, and your commitment to protecting children even at personal cost. She pulled out another document, this one bearing the letterhead of the local bar association. You've been nominated for the Young Lawyers Public Service Award for your work with families in crisis. The nomination specifically mentions your sacrifice to help a lost child and your subsequent dedication to family advocacy. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the recognition, especially given that 3 weeks earlier he had been a suspended attorney working as a handyman with no prospects for returning to legal practice. There's one more thing, Isabella said, reaching for her phone. Sophia has been asking about the man who helped her find Maria. She's been drawing pictures of you and wants to thank you personally. Would you be available to visit with her this weekend? The idea of seeing Sophia again brought back memories of that frightening morning when everything had seemed to be falling apart. Now, 3 weeks later, that same choice was leading to opportunities he couldn't have imagined. I'd love to see her, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Isabella smiled warmly. She's been telling everyone at her preschool about the nice man who helped her when she was scared. Her teacher says it's helped her process the experience and feel safer about being in new situations. As their meeting continued, Isabella outlined the strategy for the upcoming meeting with Judge Hawthorne. They would present Marcus's work with the foundation as evidence of his character and professional competence, while demonstrating that his decision to help Sophia was consistent with the protective instincts that made him an excellent father. Marcus, Isabella said as they concluded their discussion, I want you to know that whatever happens with your custody case, you have a permanent home here at the foundation. Your work with families like Roberto's has been exceptional, and you've reminded all of us why we chose this field. That weekend, Marcus visited Sophia and her family at their home in the Riverside district. Sophia ran to greet him at the front door, her face bright with excitement and recognition. She showed him the pictures she had drawn of their adventure together and proudly introduced him to her stuffed animals as the man who helped her find Mama. During dinner with Isabella's family, Marcus learned more about the foundation's impact on the community and his role in its mission. Isabella's husband, a pediatrician, shared stories of families they had helped over the years, while Sophia entertained everyone with her chatter about school and friends. As the evening ended, Sophia hugged Marcus goodbye and whispered in his ear, "Thank you for helping me find my way home." Walking back to his car, Marcus realized that Sophia's words applied to more than just that frightening morning behind the courthouse. His choice to help her had led him home to the work he was meant to do, the community where he belonged, and the path back to his daughter Emma. 1 week later, Marcus sat in Judge Hawthorne's chambers with Elena and Isabella, presenting his case for expanded custody with Emma. The judge listened carefully to their arguments, reviewed his work with the foundation, and asked thoughtful questions about his future plans. Judge Hawthorne's decision was swift and decisive. "Mr. Chen, your absence from your original hearing was concerning, but the circumstances were extraordinary and consistent with the kind of protective instincts we want to see in parents. I am granting your appeal and ordering a new custody evaluation with the goal of establishing shared custody arrangements." 6 months later, Emma spent her first weekend at Marcus's new apartment, decorated with her artwork and filled with the laughter he had missed for so long. If this story has touched your heart, let us know where you're listening from today and share your thoughts about the power of choosing compassion over convenience. Sometimes when we help others find their way home, we discover that we've found our own way as well.